Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We have a sponsorship by Palantir, which makes sense. Companies sponsor things all the time to be able to get their brand awareness and word out. But this is an interesting sponsorship because this is the first time Palantir has sponsored an individual person. Palantir has partnered with Ukrainian tennis star Elina Svitvolina. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. And this is one of the most interesting sponsorships I've seen in a very long time. I did a tweet about it. Let's break down this tweet. I'll talk about my analysis here and then go into why I think they picked this person, why they didn't go after the Tom Brady's or LeBron James of the world, and why this sponsorship is probably one of the best sponsorships I think the company could have done, really out of all the different sports stars they could have tried to go after. Now, they did have sponsored F1 before and racing and Ferrari. They work with them. But an individual person, this is the first one. Palantir has just signed their first ever sponsorship with an individual athlete, and the implications of it go far beyond a traditional sponsorship. Palantir has sponsored sporting events like F1 before, but they haven't picked an individual person to represent their brand. Today, they did. Her name is Elina Svitvolina, a Ukrainian tennis star. She reached career-high rankings of world number 3 in singles and 108 in doubles. Svitvolina has won 17 World WTA Tour singles titles and finished runner-up 3 times. I actually don't know what WTA stands for. I think World Tennis Association or something. But she's a big deal in the tennis world. Now, this really matters, and this is why I think this is one of the most interesting sponsorships that Palantir could have done, and one that's going to pay dividends in the future. The world's most evil data spy company is sponsoring an athlete at the highest level of competitive sports. The narrative about Palantir being some horrible company is starting to fall apart in front of us. And to speak on that for a little bit, I think if it was truly an evil spy data company, which we all know it's not, but if the perception of that was really what we think, what the rest of the world thinks it is, a star like Elina would not work with Palantir, right? No one wants to be associated with a company that's like targeting and killing and doing all this horrible, evil stuff. Like, that's just not how it's going to work. Now, the brand perception from some Vice articles might have created that narrative because they still show up in Google results, but that's not actually the case. And I think people are starting to understand that. FTX tried to sponsor Taylor Swift for $100 million when Taylor Swift was going on tour, or preparing to go on tour about a year ago, and she rejected because she didn't feel that FTX was a worthy sponsor. Maybe someone on her team was like, hey, this is going to be a really dicey, shady sponsorship, so let's not do this. The money isn't a motivator at these levels. Athletes know their brand is worth way more than a few bucks, and Elina would not have worked with Palantir if she didn't believe in them. Which begs the question, why does she believe in him? And this was the quote she gave today. Palantir has been a friend to Ukraine since the Russian aggression began. I am thankful for the work they are doing in helping my government continue its fight to peacefully exist within our borders. Palantir is helping that cause, and my decision to partner with them helps advance our humanitarian missions. To me, this is one of the most amazing quotes you could ever get. I mean, the problem in the US and the UK right now is the public still thinks Palantir is a company trying to steal your data. That's not what Ukraine and Ukrainian people think. And this quote right here, one of the biggest tennis stars in the world from Ukraine, saying, I want to work with Palantir and take their money because they are helping our country keep its sovereignty, is a big deal. You can't buy that support. You have to earn it. And so as we see Palantir playing a larger role in the overall world, and especially with what they're doing in Ukraine, it kind of begs the question about why do they pick this sponsorship? And I think the number one reason is because even though in the United States and in the United Kingdom, where, you know, there's a lot of public backlash from all these organizations trying to say they're an evil company and they shouldn't get the NHS deal, in Ukraine, that's not happening. In Ukraine, they're seen as a beacon of freedom, as something that's protecting democracy. So it makes sense to create a synergistic relationship that is mutually beneficial with one of the biggest Ukrainian tennis stars to validate and establish that relationship and accentuate it across the masses for believing that Palantir is a company that actually cares about values and ethics and maintaining democracy, and not just some evil spy company that's doing horrible things. Now, what does this mean from a business perspective? So let's go back to this. May 25th, 2023, Palantir and the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine strike a reconstruction partnership, meaning as the war starts to come to an end, and it's not fully over yet, but it's been 18 months, likely going to end, I would assume, within the next year, Ukraine has to rebuild because a lot of stuff has happened, a lot of war-torn damage has happened, and as a result, Ukraine needs partners to be able to build. Palantir, remember, is going to be enhancing the digital capabilities for electronic public services, providing the defense and reconstruction of Ukraine, consolidating the efforts in the field of digitization, digital innovations, and integration of Ukraine into the international market, and promoting the implementation of projects with the support of the armed forces of Ukraine. So Palantir gave their software to Ukraine for free because they believed in saving democracy before generating a profit. And as a result, they built up so much genuine, not fake, but actually authentic goodwill that now the big money flowing into Ukraine by the likes of BlackRock and JP Morgan to help fund reconstruction efforts is likely going to make its way into Palantir. Because who else would you trust to actually lead a digital transformation to build up Ukraine to where it used to be? Which goes to the next piece of news that we've covered before. This news broke I think a week ago, that BlackRock and JP Morgan are helping set up Ukraine's reconstruction bank. Essentially, what they're going to be doing is building an entire fund. I don't know how big it is, but I would imagine it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars to be able to literally rebuild a new country from scratch, given all the damage that has happened. From a digitization perspective, from an actual real estate perspective, right? Building up those buildings that got bombed and making sure they're able to be part of the society again, and then integrating them back into the international markets so that they can start doing business with all these other countries as they were doing before the war, means that is essentially a big data problem where you need to be able to manage that. And I just don't know what other company other than Palantir that has gained the trust and the respect of the Ukrainian government and more so the Ukrainian people to be able to do that. And the only way the Ukrainian people really know that Palantir is that thing is if the word gets out, right? The story has to get out. The message has to get out that the reason Ukraine's sovereignty is intact today, even though they don't have nuclear weapons and they've been able to fend off Russia for the past 18 months, is because of this one software company called Palantir. And I don't know if Ukrainians know that. I wouldn't expect them to know that, right? They're fighting for their lives. They don't have time to look at the geopolitical news and what software is protecting them. But sponsoring stars in Ukraine that on an international level are recognized because of their athletic prowess is a great thing to do. And it makes sense. It's one of those sponsorships where I'm like, you're not wasting your money. You are actually gaining brand awareness because you're putting your money into someone that has the brand affiliation with an entire country, to be able to say, hey, this logo means something. And that quote she gave today is absolutely phenomenal in terms of what Palantir is being able to do to help protect and build up Ukraine. So you had a war happen. Palantir gave their software for free. Alex Karp was the only CEO that went to meet Volodymyr Zelensky 3 months after the war happens, and the software is being used to fend off Russia. Then 18 months later, you're assuming the war is going to come to an end, and the Ministry of Digital Reconstruction in Ukraine says, okay, it's time to rebuild. We're going to select Palantir as our official partner. That happened May 25th. Then, about a couple days ago, you got JP Morgan and BlackRock saying, hey, we can make some money from this reconstruction, and that's what they need to do. They need to make money. Let's fund hundreds of billions of dollars, I'm assuming, into Ukraine in order for all these companies and governments and organizations to be able to actually rebuild a thriving country so that it can re-enter into the global markets. I just imagine that the $100 billion that the United States has sent to Ukraine in defense spend, and that the money that's coming from private entities in order to be able to fund the reconstruction, Palantir sits in the middle of all of that. They're going to get some of that defense money, and they're going to get a bunch of that private money to be able to actually help them build out and reconstruct their entire country. And sponsoring this star today was essentially establishing themselves as one of the premier software companies in Ukraine for the Ukrainian people, where one could imagine there are either hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to be made over the next decade just from one country because of what has happened. And it's an unfortunate thing that it has happened, but that is the goal of Palantir, that when bad things happen, they are there to protect people. They are there to actually make a difference and not care about short-term profits, which is why those F-class shares are so important, because typical shareholders will be like, hey, our software is keeping them alive. We should get $1 billion. Alex Karp was like, no, that's not what you do in these moments. You give the software, you protect a country because life matters more than profits, and then you worry about profits in the long term in another way. You've got to always get the money, but you don't need to make a big deal out of it when someone's trying to not die. And as a result of that, it builds up so much genuine goodwill that they actually trust you to give you more money. So this is a great sponsorship. This is an awesome sponsorship. We're not going to see it reflect in the short term, but over the long term, as Palantir builds up credibility in Ukraine and really helps them rebuild and reconstruct their country, I think it's going to be a big deal for the company long term. So those are my thoughts. Palantir partnering with international sensation tennis superstar Alina Svitolina from Ukraine. And she decided to do the partnership because she feels that Palantir is actually helping protect her country. And overall, this should help our brand awareness in the country to be able to get us more deals and to do a good thing for Ukraine, which I believe should have some permeating effects across the entire continent of Europe, so that more and more countries that have this negative perception of Palantir realize, wait a second, if the best tennis player from Ukraine is saying, no, they actually saved my country, and then they're reconstructing the entire country, maybe we shouldn't listen to some tabloids saying that Palantir is an evil company, and we should kind of see what they're actually doing in the world. So those are my thoughts. Thanks so much for listening and watching. I'll see you in the next one.